Questioner says, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. I just wanted a clarification on why there's a different times, or why is there different times of Asr. While I live in London, the main central mosque has one time, and a few other smaller mosques have different times, about half hour in difference. Which one is right? Once again, may Allah reward you. Ameen. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Thank you for your dua. May Allah reward you with good in both worlds. Ameen. To keep things simple and to keep things brief, because this is a very long, lengthy issue of khilaf, of which the ulama of the past, they differ. Two main views or schools of thought. The first is that Salat al-Asr comes in when Salat al-Dhuhr goes out. And the second is, rather, there is a longer period of time after Salat al-Dhuhr before it's time to pray Salat al-Asr. Now, we want to keep things simple and easy and brief, but just allow me just a bit to massage your mind by taking you to the original method of calculation of time with regards to the daily prayers in the time of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. We know that they didn't have modern clocks. They knew about time, but a big part of the calculation of time was by looking at the sky, the sun, the moon, all right, and also using different things like sundials, placing a rod in the ground and looking at the shadow of the rod. What happens when the shadow of the rod of the stick is the exact same length as the stick of the object? What happens when the shadow is double the size, double the length of the rod? When does Asr come in? When does Asr go out? When does Dhuhr come in? When does Dhuhr come out? All right. So the ulama, they differ on when is to make Salat al-Asr based off of the original method of calculation. So most of the fuqaha from the Maliki school, the Shafi'i school, the Hanbali school, rather the two main disciples of Imam Abu Hanifa, Abu Yusuf and Muhammad ibn Hassan, also Imam Tahawi and others, they took the view that Asr comes in as soon as Dhuhr goes out. And that is when the pole or the object or the stick is the exact same length as the shadow, or the shadow is the exact same length of the object. All right. And they have many different evidences and proofs for this. From them, to keep things simple, is the hadith of Anas ibn Malik in the Sahihain, in which he mentions that the Prophet ﷺ would lead the Sahaba in Salat al-Asr. And then they would leave his masjid and they would go to a place called Awali. And when they went to Awali, the sun was extremely bright. It still was piercing. It still was hot. It still was like really white, really sharply hot outside. So the ulama, they say the distance between the Prophet's masjid and the region of Medina called Awali, it is impossible for a person to make it there and the sun has not begun to become yellow and not as sharp and not as hot. There's not enough time. In other words, they say that this means that the Prophet made Salat al-Asr as soon as it came in. He made Salat al-Asr much earlier than those who say that you make it at a later point. As soon as the rod's length was the exact same size as its shadow, siwa az-zawal, besides the original shadow from the sun going to its zenith, then they say that's when he made Salat al-Asr, and it's impossible for him to make Salat al-Asr at a later point. That's just one of their proofs. They have others. All right. As far as the view of Abu Hanifa rahimahullah, or the main view, and most of the Hanafi scholars who came later on, even though some of the ulama said that Imam Abu Hanifa took the view of the majority as well, then they say that Salat al-Asr comes in when the length of the shadow is twice the length of the original object, the stick or the rod. Okay. And they say that Abdullah bin Umar radiallahu anhu narrated that the Prophet ﷺ, he told us the similitude of you, meaning the Muslims, my nation, my followers, towards the end of time is like that of the people who worked. One group of people, they work from the morning to mid-noon. Another group of people, they work from mid-noon or midday to Salat al-Asr. And both of them, they quit. They stopped working and they were only given a specific portion. The hadith says that the Muslims, my followers, they took the rest of the work from Salat al-Asr towards sunset and they got double reward. So some of the Hanafi ulama, they say this hadith clearly proves that the time of Salat al-Asr is longer than the time of Salat al-Dhuhr. is longer than the time of Salatul Dhuhr. That hadith is in the Sahihain as well. A very, very long discussion, the ins and outs. Many of the ulama, they debated on this issue, supporting the view of the Jumhur, most of the Fuqaha, and going with the view of Abu Hanifa. From those who explained the opinion of most of the ulama with strength was Ibn al-Qayyim and others, and they refuted that view harshly and said that it was totally erroneous. And the other ulama from the Hanafi madhab who did the exact opposite, and they said rather this proves so on and so forth. This was a very, very long issue of khilaf. And before we even get into this issue, as I said before in brief, you have to understand how was time calculated in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. How were the 5 daily salat made and performed? Did they have prayer schedules? Was there a calendar? All right. Did they use navigation? So on and so forth. What did they do to calculate the time? So the more that you understand of the traditional original way, the easier it is for you to understand how things became more complicated later on, how things became easier later on with regards to modern means of time calculation, of navigation, of astronomy, etc. Khairan inshallah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that's the brief issue. When does Asr come in? And also, tayyib. That's sufficient for that. As far as which view is correct, what should you do? Then we advise you to take precaution. We advise you to take precaution. When you're in doubt, you're not a student of knowledge, you don't have the necessary ilm, the necessary details, then inshallah go with the view of the majority. Go with the Jumhur. Go with most of the ulama. If you're a student of knowledge and you can decipher, different story. You go where you feel is strongest. But if you cannot decipher and you're a layman, then stick inshallah ta'ala with the safety, and that is the view of most of the scholars of the past. Bidnillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. Last but not least, a few brief points or disclaimers. And the first is that the Hanafi ulama, they were, you talking about the early ones, Imam Abu Hanifa, Abu Yusuf, Muhammad ibn Hassan and others, they were mujtahideen. They were scholars who were independent. They deduced their own rulings. They had their own principles. They had their own theories. They had their own practical issues. And the other ulama as well. So many times people, they think that the Hanafi scholars just differ with the rest of the ulama because they don't love the sunnah, or they don't have any sunnah, they don't have no knowledge whatsoever. No. Sometimes it's based off of theory. Usul and qawaid are different. So if the asl is different, if the qaid is different, then obviously the practice is going to be different. Okay? So they have different ways of looking at hadith, accepting hadith, understanding the hadith, so on and so forth. And there isn't any alim except that he has good with him, that which is correct, and he has that which is a mistake because he's a human being, or that which he didn't know about if it's not necessarily a mistake. No one is perfect, no one knows everything. All right? So these are just some few basic guidelines with regards to the fiqh and the reasons of khilaf. And there's a systematic way of studying fiqh to avoid the different issues which are difficult, burdensome, and confusing. And we've mentioned this many times before about being safe, being precautious, and systematically learning and systematically studying. Okay? Last but not least is, don't make this an issue which causes you to speak ill of other Muslims and you don't know the proper knowledge yourself. All right, this is in brief and short. Stick with the view of most of the ulama. Make Salat al-Asr according to the majority of the fuqaha as soon as it comes in. As far as if you're traveling one day and you go to a Hanafi masjid and they made Salat al-Asr a little later and you join them in the Jama'ah, la ba's. There's nothing wrong with that. Bi'idhnillahi subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah the Exalted surely knows best.